right. Now we're talking. I got the power. Let's see if my other mic will work. No. All right. Man, we are packed. And don't anyone look at me crying. Because if you guys start bawling, I'll lose it up here. But this morning, I want to welcome everybody to the church that Jakum called home for the past 42 years. Hillside Community Church. And this morning, I miss my friend. Jesus said to his disciples, "Whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant." Jakum was a great man because he loved his Lord Jesus Christ with all his heart, mind, and strength. He was great because he stood upright with integrity, and he was great because he loved and cared and served the needs of others. At 12:02 on Monday morning, my whole world as I have known it was turned upside down. My pastor, my mentor, and best friend for the past 40 years is gone. And my life isn't the same anymore. What we would like to do to honor Pastor Joe this morning is to sing a couple of worship songs. Now, anyone in here ever hear Joe sing? I'm gonna guarantee not one hand goes up. Because if I get the story right from what he told me, when he was in choir at Faith School of Theology, some girl told him he was tone deaf and basically couldn't sing a lick. But no one worshiped God like Pastor Joe, in spirit and in truth. He always honored his God. And now today, if you're able to stand and sing with us, we want to honor Joe and give glory to God, to the God he loves so much.
The splendor of the King, clothed in majesty, let all the earth rejoice, all the earth rejoice. He wraps himself in light, and darkness tries to hide, and trembles at his voice, trembles at his voice. How great is our God? Sing with me, how great is our God? And all will see how great is our God.
Yes, you are.
In age to age he stands, and time is in his hands. Beginning and the end, beginning and the end. The Godhead three in one, the Father, Spirit, and Son, the Lion and the Lamb, the Lion and the Lamb. How great is our God? Sing with me, how great is our God? And all will see how great is our God. You're the name above all names. You are worthy of all praise. And my heart will sing, how great is our God.
Yes, you are.
You're the name above all names. You are worthy of all praise. Yes, my heart will sing, how great is our God. How great is our God? Sing with me, how great is our God? And all will see how great is our God. How great is our God? Sing with me, how great is our God? And all will see how great is our God. is our God. Sing with me, how great is our God, and all will see how great is our God.
Yes, you are. Jesus, you are here. In grandeur earth is quick before, moved by the sound of his voice. In the seas that are shaken and stirred, can be calmed and broken for my regard. And through it all, my eyes are on you. And through it all, it is well. And through it all, my eyes are on you, and it is well with me. Yes, it is. And far be it for me to not believe, even when my eyes can't see. And this mountain that's in front of me will be thrown into the midst of the sea. And through it all, my eyes are on you. And through it all, it is well. And through it all, my eyes are on you, and it is well.
It is well. Well, we have a few people that are going to speak about Pastor Joe. And believe me, I would think that everyone that is in here would have had something to say if given the opportunity. But our first speaker is Jeff Bell. Jeff, would you come forward?
Greetings. I greet you from Faith Bible College. Dr. Ward, our president, wasn't able to come. I got too many titles, but as the chancellor of the college, I've come to commemorate with you and celebrate the life of Pastor Joe Jakum. He went to college 1973 from Baltimore, Maryland, and I met him in 75, fall of 75. I went to school. By that time, he was married and found a northern girl, just so you all know. The smile that I see in the pictures was a smile I remember him for. I don't ever remember seeing Joe down. He seemed to always have a smile. Didn't matter where I met him. More so in the latter years, I was blessed to stay at his house and preach at this church. And what a joy it was to be with Joe. It was just a great blessing. And I see a number of alumni here today. If you were in school around that time, he could be a little mischievous, a little bit, but he loved his college, and he really loved Dr. Peer. Had a great love and respect for Dr. Peer. Called Dr. Peer often. Dr. Peer would tell me I was talking to Joe. I think I got to preach here because Joe liked Dr. Peer. Dr. Peer liked me, so I got to come and preach here. As I reminisced in my own heart, I spoke to Sister, we call her Sister Pearl Wells, and she shared her heart and thoughts about how she loved Brother Joe Jakum and what a blessing he was in her life. She's the secretary of the alumni. I'm the president of the alumni, which is another reason why I wanted to come and greet the alumni and tell them that I'm very, very proud of Joe. He holds a record at the college that I don't think anybody is going to beat him. I think Jesus will come before they're able to beat him. But he joined Faith Fellowship, which is a kind of an arm of the ministry of the college, and was ordained by Dr. Peer in that fellowship. And he was part of that fellowship faithfully for 38 years, held credentials with the college, and we're so proud of him. As I thought about today and the opportunity to stand here, and thank you for the opportunity to do that, I asked the Lord what he'd like for me to say. And so briefly, let me tell you this. I was just drawn to the story of David. Remember, David had a son by Bathsheba, and the child was sick. And David prayed much for this child, that the child would live. And he skipped food, and he skipped entertainment, and he just focused on crying out to God. At the end of the day, the child died. And the people were amazed when David said, well, give me something to eat. Let's move on. They thought they didn't even dare tell him that the child had passed, because if he mourned this hard when the child was sick, what was going to be like to deal with David after that? But David said these words, I cannot bring him back to me, but I can go to him. And so as a church, I challenge you, you cannot bring him back, but you can go to where he is. He left you a marked path. He showed you the way. He admonished you. He instructed you. He led you. He guided you and gave you great directions. And one day we will meet again, and we'll see that smile and that rejoicing and that heart for God like we used to know. I pray for you that God will strengthen you and God will encourage you and make you a strong witness of the life that he lived before you. He loved you. Man, he loved you. And so go and love others likewise. Thank you again for the privilege of being here with you today.
Thank you. Well, now we have someone that probably has known Joe longer than any of us, and that's his good friend, Terry Mahoney. You brought your own tissue?
That little package, it's not going to be big enough. I'm telling you that right now. So great to see so many here today to honor Joe. Feels a little bit like what heaven might be like when we get there, to see those faces. I've known Joe for a long time. I would always refer to Joe as Pastor Joe. Whenever we were at church, whenever we were around people, because I respected and loved the guy, because he was just that kind of guy. But today, since Joe has gone on, he's rejoicing with a voice that is, I'm sure, beautiful now. I hope so. I don't know if heaven could take it if it wasn't. But he's there in the choirs of heaven, worshiping God. So if it's okay with you guys, I'm just going to call him Joe, my friend Joe. Joe, as we all know, if you knew him, had kind of a crazy sense of humor. He would joke about when his time came at the end, how he would go. He said, I don't think I want to do the traditional route with a casket and pallbearers. I just don't think my friends will be able to hold me. So he decided to get cremated. Then he would joke about that. When they cremate me, I think the place is going to go up in flames. But I'm pretty sure he'll be happy to know that it didn't go up in flames. Mary can attest to that. It didn't go up in flames, right, honey? Okay, good. So for now, it'll just be Joe. I first met Joe, even before I say that, just seeing this picture of the wedding, I don't think I ever apologized, Wanda, for crashing your wedding that day. Please forgive me. But I met Joe and Wanda for the first time in 1975. Jeff Bell was a classmate of mine, my first roommate at Faith School of Theology. And Joe was just, he loved to joke around, and he was also, loved sports. He was very competitive on the sports field. And he carried that with him when we started the church. He was very competitive. He always wanted to do the best that he could do. When we started the church, along with Pat and Joe, and I came along to help back in 1981. We wanted to build a church that wasn't your just typical church. We wanted to build a church that would impact our city, a church that would build community among our members, a church that would glorify Jesus Christ. And one of the unusual ways that we did that in the beginning was we had a lot of sports. And Joe, believe it or not, was very involved in every sport, whether it was basketball, if it was softball, if it was volleyball, believe it or not, he even played tennis. And my brother Pat can attest to the fact that Joe fought and he played to win always. And he carried that same passion in serving Christ. He played to win, he played hard. No matter what he did, he was sure to do the best that he could do. He was always such a great friend to me. I could tell him anything at any time about anything, and it never shocked him. He just stood there and loved me, helped me, gave me advice, prayed with me until I got back on track. Sorry. When I had my print shop, I needed some extra help. Joe offered to help at the print shop, excuse me. Believe it or not, great pastor, a great friend, terrible printer. I'm just putting it out there. But he would help me. He came and helped me. When I needed some extra work, Joe offered to help me or let me clean the church, and I did that until Pastor Paul took over. When I needed a place to live, Joe and Wanda were gracious enough and took me in. We watched a lot of Downton Abbey, a lot of American Idol. And oddly enough, Joe always disagreed with Wanda and my assessment of the contestants. But believe it or not, his assessment always agreed with the judges. I don't know how that worked. I really don't. When my life was in some turmoil, Joe was there for me. And he encouraged me to get back on track. He's finished his course. And very rightly so, heard, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." There's so many stories that have been told this past few weeks, so many wonderful memories on Facebook and social media about Joe. One of the ones that I especially enjoyed was one that Melissa Marquis mentioned about just imagining Pastor Joe and her dad, Gene, and Roger Williker fishing up in heaven. He loved to fish, you may know. Being in the very presence of God for eternity. Well, there's other ways that Joe can live on for eternity, and that's in the legacy that he built over the course of his life. The legacy of how much he loved his family. And boy, did he love his family. Nothing could ever come between him, Wanda, Jason, Sheena, and the girls, ever. Also, he can live on the legacy of how he loved this church. Joe constantly was concerned about the people that attended this church. He was always studying, he never gave up, and always was there, putting it out to give him a call anytime. How many pastors do you see saying, "Call me anytime if you have a problem. Here's my number." And then the legacy of how much he loved the Lord himself. Joe poured his life into us. Everyone that's here, Joe touched in some way. And he poured his life into us so that we could pour our lives into others. And in doing that, there's no better way to honor Joe my pastor, my friend, and to honor Jesus Christ than to follow that example. Thank you.
All right. Can you hear me? Good. We're going to have Brian Doobie come and share now. Getting old, Brian.
I need glasses.
I know, I see
It
that.
happens to all of us, huh? I'm glad you left these up here for me. I may need them. I've been a member here for 25 plus years, and I've known Joe for 32 years. And, great pastor, leader, teacher, mentor. But for me, the most important thing was he was my friend, and he was a very, very good friend. And he changed my life. I want to share a few stories with you of just interactions I've had with him over the years. I'll go all the way back to the beginning. 32 years ago, I met my pastor at a keg party. If you belong to New Covenant Church, you may have heard this story before. And the people who we had the party at, they're actually here, the D'Amicos. So this might be new to them, I don't know, but we'll see. But their son, Tony, was one of my best friends growing up. And his parents were going away, so we're like, yeah, let's throw a big ripper. So we got a bunch of half barrels, quarter barrels. Somehow, and I don't know to this day, but Bruce found out before we had the party. So he convinced Joe, you got to go. Joe lived right down the street. He's like, Joe, you got to go. These two knuckleheads are doing something. I know they're up to something. So he did. About an hour after the party started, here comes Pastor Joe walking down the driveway. All right, let's go. Time to go. Everyone's got to leave. Take your bear. Get out. The people are walking down the driveway. Praise the Lord, Pastor. Hallelujah. But Joe had a smile on his face. It didn't bother him because he came from that background, the same background I had, and I'm not sharing anything that he hasn't shared from the pulpit, drug and alcohol background, but so he knew these were his people. This was us. So I got an opportunity after. I stayed back to help clean up, and Tony introduced me. He said, this is my pastor, and he just kind of looked at us. He's like, you guys are nuts. He's like, how many kids were here? We're like, oh, probably over 100. He's like, But then I was able to have a 90-second conversation with him. And he just invited me to church. And I accepted. I showed up, went to youth group, and I'm here now because he spoke to me that night and reached out to me. And I went in the military for 4 years. I came back about half a year. I just remembered meeting him and all that and a few other people, and I ended up back here. So if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be. God can work in any way, but he reached out to me, and I love him to death for that. Over the years, we grew very close. There was like a 4-year stretch where Jen and I would be over Joe and Wanda's every weekend, and we'd be watching TV or movies, and we'd be ordering takeout all the time. We grew very close. Vacations together. I used to go to a casino with Joe. We'd go fishing, tons of fishing. But I want to share a couple more stories. One of them was on a trip we went. We went on a cruise. And if you know anything about going on a cruise, it was us four. And at dinner time, you sit with people you don't know. And so we had 8 people at our table. There were 2 other couples. They were from Louisiana. So every night we went around the dinner table. What did you do? What did you do? And it was the same story every night. Wanda, Jen, and I we went out shopping, or we went out to lunch, we went here, and then Joe would be the same thing every night. Stayed on board, stayed in my cabin, and I read a book. Well, these people were getting aggravated. Like, you spent all this money on a cruise, and you're staying in there. So every night, Joe was hearing us. So finally, we're walking up on the 5th night, and he says, man, these stinking people, I got a good one for them tonight. And I'm like, what are you going to do? He's like, don't worry about it. I want you to be surprised, too. Okay. So we go around, and the same thing, Wanda, Jen, and I, we went out shopping. It gets to Joe, and one of the husbands says, let me guess, you stayed on board, you stayed in your cabin, and you read. And Joe's like, actually, no, I got off the ship today. So they're like, oh, that's great. What'd you do? Where'd you go? I went paragliding. So the two husbands there kind of knew he was joking around, but one of the women was like, "Oh my God, that's great! Tell us all about it." He's like, "Yeah, they hook up a parachute to you, attached to a boat, and then they take off. But it was a little rough because the first 100 yards, I was just kind of dragging on the water, bouncing up and down, and then I lost it right there. And then they knew that he was kidding around, but." Those are the stories that really touch my heart because he's able to laugh at himself and bring enjoyment to others. But I got one more, and this is absolutely my favorite story. And we went to dinner one night, and it was Joe, Wanda, Jen, and I. And I got to tell you, I'm 49 years old, and I don't know that I've ever met anyone as obnoxious as we did that night. They sat at the table across of us, and as soon as we walked in, it was a husband and wife, and the wife just started making all these obnoxious comments about Joe, about his weight. Very loud, like we could just sit there. So after about 20 minutes, of all the people sitting at that table, most people would pick me to get up and say something, but Wanda was like, "I've had enough. I've had it. I can't take it anymore. This woman is so rude, I'm going over there to say something." So Joe looks at her, he's like, "Wanda Jane, just relax, don't worry about it, ignore it, it's not a big deal." So I was like, wow, I'm impressed. Usually Joe has some type of warped humor or something. 30 seconds later, I'm cutting my steak, and I hear Joe say, "No more food for you, I can't have you getting big." So I look up, and he has Wanda's plate, and he's taking food off her plate. So now, this woman who's sitting over there is like grabbing her husband. Look, he's not even letting her eat her own dinner. So as we're leaving, the dinner finished, Jen and Wanda walked out to the car, and I'm walking with Joe, and he gives me a little side elbow, and he's like, "Watch this." So he walks over to the table where the woman is, and he just stops real quick, and he picks his shirt up and shows his belly, puts it back down, "Have a nice night," and he walked out. If that's not the best mic drop in the world, I don't know. But I'm going to wrap up right now. I'm going to close up with one thing. Like I said, I'm 49 years old. Everybody goes through storms. Everybody goes through trials. The book of James talks about that. Anytime I needed anything, he was there for me. I mean, I recently went through something last summer, and I would, text messages. It would just say, "Elvis movies and takeout." And I'm like, "Yeah, man, I'm coming over. I'll be by." Be there to pray for me. I've got a little bit of a big mouth. People who know me sometimes, no matter whether I'm right or wrong, and I was usually wrong, but he would always be there for me. It didn't matter. He just always was there. Now, he would tell me I was wrong. I mean, me and Scott have both been called idiots probably 100,000 times from Pastor Joe, but he loved us. And, there was one time where I got upset, and Wanda pulled me aside. She was like, "Joe loves you. This is why he's telling you this stuff." And I'm like, "I know. I'm just thick-headed, but that's all right." He was a great guy. He was one of my best friends, and I'm going to miss him dearly. I love you. Thank you for letting me come up here, please. Thank you.
He says, "Dear Joe, I am so sorry I couldn't be in Connecticut for your memorial service. This COVID thing is unrelenting in me. I'm sure the church is overflowing with family and church members who loved you. I've seen so many posts on Facebook from people you have helped over the years. You should be comforted in knowing you touched so many lives. You truly love Jesus and helping people. You always came through when you knew you were needed. Growing up, we didn't hang out, probably because I was older and much too cool for you. You had Phil and Don as best friends, and I know you didn't like me telling you what to do. I sure did try, though. I don't understand why you were taken so early in life. I feel you had so much more to give. But I guess God saw things differently. The only comfort I have is I know my little brother is pain-free and having no more health issues. Your Florida family will absolutely miss you, but we know you'll be watching over us. One last bit of information for you. I've been told by many people that Maryland steamed crabs are served in heaven. So enjoy. Love, Linda. P.S. I know you aren't a hugger, but I'm sending one anyway. Joe wasn't a hugger, was he? And everybody would tease him and go up to him and give him the biggest hug just because they knew it would rile them. Right now, we're going to have Miranda and Maria, Rye, Reese, Reagan probably come up and sing one of the all-time best songs for each and every one of us that came to the Lord. A song of redemption. And I'm going to get out of the way. good job. Your uncle and your pops would be extremely proud of you all. Now, I don't get to see this guy often enough, but I'm glad. Sorry. You all set? You wanted the mic? Yeah, I got it. This guy that I don't often see a lot, we're not going to see him for a little bit longer. And instead, we are going to have Uncle Joe's favorite, Miranda Black. Come on up.
Thank you to everyone who's out here today. Those who have traveled far, it means so much to the family that there's so many people here. It's really awesome. I just wanted to share a little bit about my Uncle Joe. He was my great uncle through marriage, but he played way more roles in my life than that. He was my great uncle, my friend, my counselor, and as some of you know, he was like my grandfather. I've never known my biological grandfathers. He was the only person in my life to step into that role, and I know that he did it as soon as I was born. He and my Aunt Wanda, they babysat me. They had me over for countless sleepovers. They took me to Disney for the first time. They would watch the same movies over and over and over again with me. Sorry about that. A lot of Shark Boy and Lava Girl. But both of them just always treated me like more than a great niece. If you've ever been to his house, you've seen his iconic big comfy chair. And I claimed the spot on the armrest until I was probably like 11 or 12. I just wanted to sit right there with him, watching silly cartoons together. We loved a good episode of SpongeBob. And that was my spot. And then I saw it as my little sister and then all of his granddaughters would sit in that same place, hugging him and bugging him just the same way that I did. And I know he loved it. I had always been told this story about when I was born. My Aunt Wanda had actually been the last girl in our family to be born. And then after that, it was all boys, everybody. My dad, my uncles, my cousins, everybody, all these boys for 40-something years. So when my parents found out I was pregnant, or they were pregnant, sorry. Woo! When my parents found out that they were pregnant, nope. Uncle Joe was convinced that I would be another boy. Sorry. When my parents found out that they were pregnant, they were convinced that I was going to be a boy. Everyone. Uncle Joe was convinced that I was going to be a boy. I mean, all these boys had been born in the family for 40-something years, so why would I be a girl? And so he showed up at the hospital when I was born, and he had a little football picture frame. And then my parents were like, no, we actually had a daughter. He was like, no, you didn't. I mean, no. And then they're like, no, we really did. He panicked. He was shocked. I've heard that he said he didn't know what to do with a girl. What do you do with a girl? He was a boy dad. He had all these boys in the family, and he brought that football picture frame. Like, what? Well, thankfully, he warmed up to me and my princess dresses and my Barbie dolls. And I had always heard this story, but I'd actually never seen that picture frame until last week while we were going through the pictures for today. There it was on the dining room table. It was the first time I'd ever seen it, and there was a picture of him and me at my baby dedication in the little football frame, and I was just in this frilly dress, and he held me in his arms. And I'd always heard this story, and I'd retold it thinking it was hilarious, but I didn't know that he held on to the frame for 22 years now. After hearing of his passing, I told my family that I had one regret. We were sitting in the airport waiting for our flight to come back to Connecticut to be with the rest of the family. I'm just afraid to step on toes and offend people, so sometimes I just hold back on things, and it was something I had held in. But if I'm being honest, I just wish that at some point, if it would be all right if I called him Grandpa Joe. Sorry. I just didn't know if he knew. If he knew that he was the only one. But of course he knew. My dad then told me. I'm sorry. He told me a story from a few months prior that he was here at the church talking to Uncle Joe. And somehow I came up in the conversation. And when he spoke of me, he called me his granddaughter. He said his granddaughter Miranda, not his niece, not his great niece. So I know that he knew. He always did. I'm just so thankful that I had him. And I feel so lucky to be related to him because he was so witty and sarcastic and wild, and he told the best stories. And I'm just going to miss him a lot, and I know all of you here will too. Thank you.
And Miranda, your Pastor Joe is thankful that you are not pregnant. So, on the plus side, well, we got someone else that I said earlier I don't get to see a lot, but part of the Black dynasty here, and that is Chris Black. Yeah.
All right, I'm glad to see I'm not the only one, doesn't work without a net. Oh, microphone, I'm sorry. Trying to project it. Okay, let's see. Okay. Was a little worried, right? Might get a little PG, my stories, but Brian already plowed that road. So we're good there. God, they had asked me, hey, would you like to say some words for Joe? And of course, I'd be honored. How long's the service? An hour? Okay, I can make that work. Other people are speaking. Comfortable chairs? Okay, we'll get through it then. We all know him, right? Everyone knows Joe. I can imagine that two people from Bristol, Connecticut, right, that don't know each other, but know Joe. Joe Jakum? Oh, yeah, right? And in that span of time, 10,000 words go by, right? Because that's the kind of guy he was. So we all know him. We could all tell stories about him, but let me tell you about my Uncle Joe. I live in Alaska, so, Facebook makes you sometimes think you're a little bit closer than you are. Texting's real easy nowadays, no long-distance rates anymore. But Joe texted me about a week and a half ago, just checking in, seeing how I was doing. I told him, hey, if I don't think too much about all the changes of the last year, it's pretty easy. And he told me, yeah, God got you through a hellish year. God got you through it. And Joe, never wasted that opportunity. And then I heard from him a few days later. He was asking me when I was going to come back to Connecticut, and I said I'll probably be back twice this year. Once for Miranda's wedding, which I guess is a little more urgent than we thought, and then that was awesome. And then I was thinking, sometime in the late spring, I'll be back. And coincidentally, that was and I'm sorry, it's going to take a long time. Coincidentally, that was the morning that Joe went into the hospital, that last interaction with him. And most of you guys know this is the second memorial service I've attended in a year. 11 months and 2 weeks ago, I attended my wife's. All right. At her service, for the speakers, they made it a point to look at me and they say, thank you for loving her. And I drew some comfort from that. Maybe Miranda will too. I drew some comfort from that because, the fact that I loved my wife had been witnessed and known to other people, right? So it helped ease the, if it didn't eliminate, it helped ease that question that we're all asking. Did they know how much we love them? And let me get through this little part. Many of you out here, because trust me, it's a shock. Many of you out here, you still have the opportunity to tell your husbands and tell your wives you love them. And you need to do it. You got to do it for me. You got to do it for Wanda. You got to do it for anybody that can't do it anymore. You have to tell them how precious they are. How every shared affection is a treasure. So please do that. Tell them you love them. And I loved my wife. I loved her. And somewhat differently, I loved my Uncle Joe. I loved him. I first heard about him when I was 4 years old. And like a lot of people, apparently, I met him in the fall of 1975. But I first heard about him when I was 4 years old. And I was a kid living in Okinawa, Japan. And it was right around Christmas, maybe just around my 5th birthday. Someone told me that my Aunt Wanda was getting married. And I was like, to who? And they're like, a man named Joe. I was like, I don't know Joe. And I can remember thinking at the time that my aunt was marrying a stranger, and I was absolutely gutted that this was happening to me. And I can remember praying that night. I used to say my prayers. I said my prayers at my bedside. I said, dear God, please don't let Aunt Wanda marry a stranger. And, God answers prayers. Because she didn't marry a stranger. She married Joe, right? And, right from the start, I was fascinated with the guy. And I used to love to watch him preach. And, he had a way of delivering a message, right? Like Brian said, he could talk to people. And I can remember one year I was home from Korea. And Joe was in the announcements, not even during a sermon, but in the announcements, he took the opportunity to talk about evil in the world. And it was right up there on Academy Street, and most of you were probably in there at the time. And it just was one of those funny things that Joe was saying. He goes, there are 3 sources of evil in this world. He says, there's Satan, the Yankees, and Duke, And I was like, and he told it better than I could, and then, he was just so witty. He was the second funniest person I ever met in my life. My wife was funnier. She was so sharp and quick that even Joe, you know him, he wouldn't have been able to keep up with her. And Joe, he, from a little 4-year-old to someone in his 50s, Joe married me to my wife. And aside from, dedication to your child, or maybe your baptism spiritually, I guess, but when it comes to our practical lives here on earth, I can't think of any service that a pastor performs that's more impactful than joining you with your spouse. And years later, I had the privilege of telling Joe, years after the wedding, how in love I was with Castine and how important she was to me, how I loved her, how I'd come to discover that a marriage is a treasure, And then not long after that, Joe texted Castine just to check in with her. And she told him how happy she was I was home from the slope. And Joe told her how much I loved her. And so, Joe was the second most important man at her wedding. And he told her how much her husband loved her. She heard it from me every day. And but it's nice, sometimes to know that other people are saying nice things about you. And Joe told her that I, her husband, had told the man I trusted more than anyone else in the world that I loved her, my wife. And that text hit Castine's phone the day before she went into the hospital. And that was Joe. So any time of trouble, I'd call Joe, right? When I deployed to Somalia, I called Joe. When I thought I had destroyed my military career, I called Joe. Anytime I was conflicted about a course in my life, I called Joe. He taught me, again, because he speaks to those common people. Somewhat inadvertently, he taught me how to look for miracles. Taught me, again, through example mostly, how to listen for God. And when Castine went into the ER and then the ICU last December, Joe was the very first person I called. She wasn't even quite loaded into the ambulance yet. There was no room for me. So I called Joe before we left. When I was lost in the greatest of sorrows, Joe called me. When I was absolutely bewildered in grief, Joe called me. And, that was the guy he was. So important in my life. When in 1988, I went to my first permanent military assignment. Up there in Boston, Hanscom Air Force Base. I was here in Bristol, got on my uniform, getting ready to go to report to my first command, and Joe drove me up to Boston, right? And the whole 2 hours up to Boston, Joe's driving, I'm in the passenger seat, and Joe's, and I'm gonna try, he's a soldier boy, oh my little soldier boy, I'll be, But that was Joe, right? He tells you it's just life, There's something so much bigger out there, and he knew it, and he wanted you to know it too. And I know any of us in this room we could tell a million stories about Joe, right? One of the greatest men we'd ever met. Man of faith. Obviously a good man. Always extending a hand in friendship, as kind and as generous as any person I'd ever met. Just a small example, Joe at a restaurant, he always bumped up the tip, right? And he did that regardless of service because he felt that was his way of being able to extend a blessing to somebody. And so even as something as small as that, he took that opportunity to put it out there. And that was his method of talking to those common people. And, I have known great men in my life, great men, but I've known one, Joe Jakum. When I was a senior in high school down in Texas, I had to write an essay about, just ambiguously, the great man. And the man I wrote about was Joe Jakum, When I was a kid, we lived in Groton for a few years, and then we lived over in the Hudson Valley. So my brothers and I, we spent a lot of summers and weekends at Joe and Wanda's. And any day in his company was a great day. And for me, from the ages of 7 to 14, we lived within 2 hours of Joe. We saw him all the time. And, it's like everyone knows the same story. Pizza, movies, impromptu road trips. It was just a blast. And in the summer, we'd ride around with Joe. When he went on his rounds, he was doing his work of the day. We'd meet one person or another. Sometimes a quick stop to see an elder in the church where they would discuss, church matters. Or other times it was just to meet a member of the congregation, just a friendly visit. A lot of times it was Paul or Terry that we were going to see. And so that was awesome. We'd spend the day riding around with Uncle Joe. But when Jason, Kurt, Scott, and I would get into the car, we'd run for the back seat because he didn't want to sit in the front seat with Joe. Yeah. So let me find my spot. Yeah, so you didn't want to sit in the front seat with Joe, and for good reason, because periodically, Joe, out of nowhere, just pow! And you get a Charlie horse in the arm or the leg, right? And he'd apologize. I don't know what's gotten into me. I just can't help it. Pow! And you get another one. And I can remember I was in the front seat. I looked back like, hey, anyone else wants to? No, we're good. Fine. I guess it's me today, And then you have no idea how long a trip across Bristol can be, right? And then, Paul, every time I see you, guess the first thing that goes through my mind, pow, just like, oh my God. But it was awesome, but I loved him, right? I loved him. And once we were in New York, and Joe, Wanda, and my mom, they, Joe and Wanda were over there, Jason was with them, and my mom, and we got together and we went to a store. And at the store, Wanda, Joe, and my mom, they're off shopping, and there's an arcade up front, and I'm hanging out at the arcade, right? It's like 1982. That's what kids did then. And so I'm hanging out at the arcade, and there was this bigger kid at the arcade, and he started bullying me. So, being mean, he would accidentally bump into me, as I went from one game to another. He'd glower at me if I smiled at him, wouldn't speak to me if I spoke to him. When I was playing a game, he'd get right behind me, breathing down my neck. And when the game was over, I turned around. I had to step around this kid, right? And he looked me in the eye the whole time, like trying to make me look away. He was that kind of guy. And if you've been through that, man, your sense of happiness, your sense of worth, your future, none of that means anything to a bully, right? They take everything from you. They force that knowledge onto you that you are simultaneously beneath their concern, yet also the center of their attention. You know, and then you wonder, what if my parents, my grandparents, you know, people who love me most, what if they knew what was happening to me, you know? A bullied kid, you know, a deep and lasting shame, you know? So I left the arcade. I couldn't stay there. And I went over and stood near the cash registers because I knew that's where Joe wanted and my mom would come out. And then I was hoping that I would kind of be over it, you know, before they got back. And it'd just be one secret humiliation that I could live with. They'd never have to know about it. You know, and I was a small kid. I was 12 or 13. I was little. And sitting there just waiting. And then I see Joe, right? And he's walking through that arcade like a lion, you know? And the bigger kid's still there playing his game. And I got this shameful thought, like, this guy took away the joy I would have for walking next to my uncle through that arcade, right? That kid, he's the only one that knows. No one else knows, but I know, and it's just devastating to me that through my life's tribulations, I'm not good enough to walk next to my uncle. You know, put that together. You know, I was not good enough to be in his company is how I thought about it. So I watched Joe walk through that arcade, and then I saw that familiar energy build up, right? And I was like, oh, what's going on here? You know? And then suddenly, like a cobra striking, pow! And that kid playing the game, he's like, what just happened? You know, he looks around, Joe's walking away. He looks over at me. I smile. You know? And it gets PG. That's right, asshole. You know? And man, I am filled with absolute gratitude, right? And Joe, by this time, Joe has seen the kid, and he just keeps walking. He's looking around, just casually walking. And Joe turns and he sees me, and he starts walking over to me. And I am filled with absolute gratitude, satisfaction, pride. You know, a 12-year-old's justice has been served, right? And, you know, maybe it's a little sad that he's got to fight my battles for me, but I don't care, you know? This is my uncle. This is the avenging lion. Just knocked the crap out of that kid. Gave him a taste of Baltimore, right? And Joe walks up to me, man, and I was just sitting there like, this is awesome, you know? And Joe walks up to me. He looks at me. He looks back at the arcade. The kid's nowhere to be found. He looks at me. He goes, I thought that kid was you. I was like, Joe, you were that close, man. And so like God's hands, right? You know, and God places the stones that carry across the river, and all those car rides paid off. So, you know, Joe was a champion, right? He lifted you up, stand by you as this life tested you. And he was loving. You know, he would not knowingly smack a bully. To this day, I believe that was God's work. And he was honest. He would be stern in his truth. I remember, you know, semi-serious, I guess. I remember once the adults in the room were all gathered together. And I was, again, little kid. We were over on Chestnut Street in Terryville. And for some reason, the adults started talking about what would happen if they died in a car accident. And, you know, who would get their kids. And Joe said if something happened to him and Wanda, Joe's sister would get Jason. And one of the other adults was like, no, we'll take Jason. And Joe was like, no, you won't. And they're like, well, no, we'll love him, you know. And he goes, no, I know you'll love him. He goes, that's not the point. He goes, he wouldn't get to church. And I can remember, right, I'm the kind of guy, even to this day. Man, I will avoid an uncomfortable conversation like I avoid broccoli on a dinner plate, right? And I'm thinking, Joe, throw him a bone, man. No one's dying in a car accident. You know, come on, you know. And at the same time, the second thought is, you know, how can you not admire a person that has that kind of conviction? You know what I mean? And then secondly, how could you not admire a man that loves his son that much? You know? And so there was another time, a few years after my parents' divorce, I was coming home from Japan. And, I like to blame Somalia, who knows what it was, but I had a big drinking problem back then, right? And I don't think, anyone in my family knew I'd ever had a beer. But when I called Joe and basically let him know for the first time, and not only did I let him know for the first time that, his nephew was an alcoholic, but I had gotten so far into the consequences of that, I really thought life was over for me. When I told this to Joe, he didn't even flinch, right? And just, it was a very low point in my life. And Joe was there, and the same philosophy of Joe Jakum comes up. It's like, he didn't sugarcoat it. He knew that consequences would have to be faced. But Joe also, kind of to paraphrase, said, hey, man, it's just life, It's just life. And I'm here for you. And, you have no idea what kind of lifeline that was. And so I came home that summer, and it was just before I was on my way to Texas. But, again, this was a few years after my parents got divorced. And I went up to Maine to visit my dad and his new wife. And I was angry at my father. I was disappointed in him. I had no respect for him. And at the end of the week, Joe drove up to Maine, and we all had lunch in York. And I think that was the last time Joe and my father met each other, had ever seen each other. And my dad got up and walked away from the table. And Joe, he took the opportunity to ask me, how'd the visit go? And, I told him it had been nice. And then I, a little arrogant and a little foolish, I said, but if he wasn't my dad, we'd have nothing to do with each other. We wouldn't even be friends. And Joe looked at me, and he goes, Chris, if I wasn't your uncle, And that's that stern honesty. And in the years since, I come to understand what Joe meant. And again, it's something I think my marriage taught me, is that we choose to love, right? Love is not necessarily a reaction to an external stimulus. That could be passion, gratitude, dependence, admiration, attraction, enchantment, but not love. Any of those feelings could become love, the way, water can evaporate from a pond and turn into rain, but it might not rain. You might just be left with a dusty, empty hole that used to be a pond. And Joe was telling me that we choose to love, that he chose to love. And you got to think, what a man, what a teacher, what a mentor, what an uncle who is wise and loving enough to deliver that truth. And Joe was my uncle, and I loved him, and I trusted him, and I tried to live my life like him. And he married me to my wife, who I love more than anyone else in this world. And he loved me because he was my uncle. He loved you, a lot of you, because he was your friend, your pastor. He was a brother, he was a son, he was a grandfather, he was a father, he was a husband. And he was my uncle. But he was only my uncle because my aunt, all those years ago, saw that he was a good, godly man who fit well into our family. And Joe did fit well into our family. And I don't think I'm alone in saying that after years, he rose and became the patriarch of that family. And, I would argue Joe was as wise as a prophet, as honest as a judge. He was as learned as a teacher, as kind and as generous as any man I've ever met. He was as loving as any father, as proud as any grandfather. He was as noble, in my mind, as any king. And he was my beloved uncle because my beloved aunt married him. He was a great man of Bristol, Connecticut, and the pastor of this congregation, in no small part because Wanda loved him, and her family lived here in Bristol, Connecticut. And that's why I say again that God places those stones that carry us across the rivers. And when I lost Castine, Joe talked to me a lot. I would try to find myself and to come back to the world every day, and I couldn't do it. And I kept asking Joe every question you can imagine. And usually it came down to something like this. What did you say to your parishioners who might be going through this horrible thing? How did you console them? How did they live again? And I was embarrassed at my need to burden him, and I was so sorry to put my sadness on him. And I told him that I knew as a pastor, as a way of apology, Joe, I know as a pastor you must counsel people. How do you get them through this rambling that makes no sense? What do you tell them? And Joe said to me, he said, Chris, it doesn't matter. I'm not your pastor. He said, I'm your uncle. And my aunt made Joe my uncle. And I can never thank her enough. And we can never thank her enough for loving the man that loved all of us. Wanda, thank you for loving him.
Technical difficulties. Let's hear from Scott.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. It's awesome to see all these faces throughout my life, all back. It's horrible why, but it's awesome to see. You know, if you can take any joy out of anything, is to look around and see history in this room and in the room next to us. My name is Scott Black. For those of you who don't know me, Joe was my uncle. Joe played many roles in my life. When I was 13 and 14, visiting from Texas, he was Uncle Hero Joey. Yeah, that's what he was. When I turned 18 and my parents got divorced, the first person I called was my Uncle Joe. When I graduated high school, he invited me to come down and move in with him. And I didn't have a role of a man in my life. The man I had in my life up to my 18th birthday, I had a very good childhood. But I had a very selfish example of what a man was. I had a selfish example of putting yourself first before your wife. Putting yourself first before your kids. And when I moved in with my uncle, he had this way of being influential in ways that you do not want him to be. He had ways of giving you advice when you did not want advice. And over the years, the man that was my uncle, golly, turned into more than that. Over the last 2 weeks, I've looked back at all the big moments in my life. You know, the day that I was going to ask my beautiful Mexiqueen to marry me. She's Mexican. It's not racist, people. Actually, she's Native American, so we changed her name to Pocahontas. I forgot that. Also not racist. She's Native American. Come on. But he was there when I decided that I was going to make her my wife. He was there when Miranda was born. He was there when Maria was born. He was there when I did not want him there. The example of a husband. Missy and I went through some very hard times. Our life was not picture perfect. Because the example of a husband that I had was selfishness. I brought that to my marriage. And I remember one night, it was 10:30, 11 o'clock. Missy and I were sleeping, and the phone rang. And it was him on the other end, and he said, Scott, he goes, I need you and Missy to come over. And I said, no, we'll see you in the morning. And he said, Scott, I need you and Missy to come over right now. And so I went, and we brought Missy. And Missy and I sat in Joe and Wanda's living room. And Joe said, the reason you're here, the reason you're here with me now is because this is what I heard you are with your wife. And it's unacceptable. He said, if you do not change the way you treat your wife, you will not have a wife to treat. At the moment, it was not something I ever wanted to hear. I dug in my heels. For those of you who know me, I tend to think I'm right, and I'm very stubborn. Both of which are mostly true 99% of the time. But it's through that example that not only did Missy and I just celebrate our 27 years together. That's right, you can clap for that. It's a big accomplishment, people. Goodness gracious. You're acting like it's a funeral. Oh, and I have to apologize for Chris. That was not PG. There are many parents here with children under the age of 10 that now have to go home and explain what that word means. It was PG-13. But Joe is the reason that my oldest daughter, who's getting married in July, is a worship leader here at the church. Joe is the reason my youngest daughter, who is 17 and going off to college to be a special education teacher, is a worship leader in the teens. Joe is the reason I sit on the board here at this church. Joe is the reason I'm a good father. I'm a decent husband. I try to put others before myself. Joe's the reason many of your faces can see mine right now. Today is like the end of a good book. You get to the last page of that book and you don't want to close it. Yes, I know. Shock, I do read. I was telling Jason it's closure, but it's not the closure that you want. It's closing that book, putting it on the shelf, and you have the memory of all the pages you read. We all share that same story, a part in that book we all share. He was like my dad. Jason's like my brother. God, dog, I'm going to miss him. But thank you all for coming.
Thanks, Scott. Well, one thing I know for sure that Pastor Joe is proud of what his son has become. He is happy that he turned the reins over to him. And at this time, he's going to share the gospel message because that's what his dad was all about.
It's so amazing seeing so many faces, some I have not seen in 30 plus years, and just seeing the legacy that my dad has had, the impact that he has made this bearable, to say the least. And just the countless number of people he's influenced in some way or another. There's people I see in this room, I won't make eye contact with you, but that left angry. And yet, somehow, some way, you were able to mend that relationship. My father never held a grudge. There was nobody that my dad was like, I'm not taking that call. They're not welcome in this church. He just didn't respond that way. My dad's the greatest man I've ever known. And I can say that without hesitation. He is the greatest man I've ever known. He showed me what it was like to how to love my wife. As Scott said, I saw him love my mom. And I mean, really love my mom. He would do anything for her at any time. The world stopped for my mom. I saw him love me. He would get angry at me at times. I can remember one story, and I have to tell this because my good friend Jesse is here. But our church goes away on a trip every year to Lake George. And so I was 15 years old. That was big time. So I got to stay home for the weekend. My dad went away, and I made the decision with no prompting, no help, but I made the decision to shave my head and get my ear pierced. My dad had always said, don't get your ear pierced, but I thought he would really like it. So he pulls up. He's in a good mood. I mean, I see a smile on his face. And it was like 200 yards away, his demeanor changed. He was like, what is that? There was like this, I never saw that side of my dad, but he's like, that better be out of your ear before I get up the stairs. Now I thought, you've seen my dad, I've got some time, right? No, he was up those stairs, and in like 5 seconds, my buddy Jesse pulled the earring out, blood everywhere. It was a horrible scene. But I also remember the times where my dad just showed how much he loved me. And my dad was a guy who liked to give gifts. He was a very generous man. And I was in college, and I was not getting along with my roommate at the time. And he brought the TV into the roommate relationship. So the 13-inch TV we had that we would play our video games on, and we would watch sports. Well, we were fighting, and he got mad that I had friends in the room till after 9 o'clock. So the next morning I come in, the TV is sold. He got rid of it. So I'm like, well, what do I do? So I called my dad. And I'm like, Dad, he just sold the TV on me. He goes, go to Circuit City. Be there in a couple hours. I got something for you. So I go, and he got me this massive, like 36-inch TV that I got to set in there and got to see the look on my roommate's face, which was wonderful. But he showed me what it was like to be a man. I'm going to miss him. I think about tomorrow night as the Baltimore Ravens get ready to play. This will be the first game that I haven't watched with my dad, or I haven't texted angry texts to during the game. For years and years and years, I blamed him for making me an Orioles fan. And now they're finally starting to get good. And I think, who am I going to talk to? I think ministry-wise, and some of you have been so kind and so encouraging, but the thought of doing this without my dad, it brings feelings, let's say that. I'm going to miss my dad. My dad was the best pop that my girls could ever have. I think he loved them more than he loved me. He did. I'm going to miss those texts every Friday night, or every Friday. Getting the text, can the girls sleep over tonight? And hey, they didn't get them for 1 week. It was like, hey, we didn't have the girls last week. We need them this week. It was a demanding fatherly text. He would do anything for them. He loved them. They were his life. And Times like this, I see people get angry that life happens like this. But I start thinking to myself, man, I had 45 years of the best man I could have ever known. I'm here today because of him. I am. I'm here today in this place with my family in church because my dad honored Christ with his life. And I'll say this, because my dad, I'm not sure if they're looking down from heaven. I'm not sure how all that really works. But if he was, I would be getting a stern look if I did not share with you what meant the most to him. He loved his family. Man, he loved his family. He loved you. Each and every one of you, I see your faces in here. He loved you. I mean, he really did. He prayed. My dad was a prayer. He would pray for you consistently over and over and over again. Some of you that haven't been in this church for years, he loved you. But man, his love for us, his love for you was nothing in comparison to his love for Jesus Christ. Man, he loved Jesus. He loved Jesus. Everything in his life was about bringing glory and honor to Christ. And that's why he was able to raise the family the way that he was. That's why he was able to impact your lives the way that it was. He would say, it's not because of him. It's because of him. My dad, many would say, and I've seen this at funerals, would say, well, of course he's in heaven. He was a good man. He was a good father. He was a good pastor. So of course he's in heaven. And my dad would be the first to say, don't go there. Do not go there. My dad did not inherit eternal life because he was a good pastor, because he was a good father. He inherited eternal life because he put his hope, his trust, his love, and his faith in his Jesus Christ. That is the only way. I implore you. I think of when Lazarus died and Martha was a mess. And Jesus comes and he says, your brother will rise again. In John 11:23, your brother will rise again. And Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. And in verse 25, Jesus says these beautiful words that give us hope. Oh man, this is our hope. I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? He asked Martha that, and I want to ask you that today. Do you believe this? Now, you would say, sure, I believe in Jesus. A lot of people believe in Jesus the same way that they believe in Santa Claus. Or they believe in Jesus as some historical figure. But when Jesus is talking here about do you believe, he's not asking about a head knowledge. He's saying, do you love me? Is your hope in me? Is your allegiance to me? Is your devotion to me? Just because you go to a church, just because you're a good father, a good mother, a good child, a good person, just because you're generous, that's not the way into eternal life. And if you believe that, you have believed a lie. My dad is with Jesus today. He's with Jesus today not because he was a good man, but because he loved Jesus with all that he had. I would ask you today, I'm not going to do an altar call. It's a funeral, all right? We're not going to get weird on you. But I want to ask you today, if you're sitting here, what are your thoughts about eternal life? What are your thoughts about the afterlife? Do you think that because you're good, that you're going to be in heaven one day? Because if that's what you think, you have believed a lie. I tell you today, though, that you can have eternal life. That though you might die, you will live. You will have eternal life if you put your trust in Jesus Christ. Put your faith in him. Give him your devotion. Maybe you're saying, I don't even know what all this means. I would tell you today just to cry out to God and say, God, reveal yourself to me. If what he's saying up there is true, show it to me. See, if I didn't say this, when I get to see my dad, he's going to say, you missed an opportunity. Now that can't happen, right? We're good. But I have to say that I love this church so much. Oh my gosh. I thought I did. I really did. I always say I love Hillside and I love the church collective, my family and friends. But man, you guys being there with us through all of this and showing what it really means to be the church has been more for our family than you can ever begin to imagine. Your prayers, the meals, the cards, the text messages. I say this, I've said this to probably a dozen people. I don't know how somebody could do this without Jesus. I don't. I would be a mess. I wouldn't be able to function. I'm only able to do this because I know where my dad is. And I know I'm going to see him again. So I know we've gone longer than the allotted time, but in honor of my dad, right? I mean, geez. But we have a slideshow. I know that Pastor Paul, I believe, is going to show. And I love you all. Thank you so much for the support and just what you guys have meant to my dad. And just to show what he's meant to you means more than you will ever know.
I don't want to pull out as many pages as Chris Black did, so I'll hold back a little bit on that for you. Just teasing you, Chris. How many in here loved Pastor Joe and felt like he was your close friend? Yeah, put him up. How does someone in this room, there's over 350 people. How can someone really do that? And there is only one way, and that was because he loved Jesus Christ so much. That was the first commandment, to love my Lord, my God, with all my heart, soul, strength, everything that is in me. And then secondly, to love people. And man, did he love people. And he loved all of you. There's one other little thing that Pastor Joe found easy in loving Christ. And he always used to tell me from Luke 7:47, I'll tell you, my sins, which are many, are forgiven. So I show much love. But he who has been forgiven little shows little love. Joe had a lot of love for everybody. I'm going to cut it there. Enough has been said. I will miss the man dearly. We will all still cry on occasion whenever we think about him. But I do want to get to this slideshow because there's just so many great pictures. And you're all possibly in there somehow.
have to do something. Last night I noticed I had to do something that I haven't had to do before, but I've got to introduce myself. It's like I'm not up here like I used to be, and there's so many new people coming that they look at me and go, "Who are you?" And believe me, I used to be somebody here. I love me too. Thank you. Time that I came to Christ in the 70s through what they called the Jesus People movement. And that's where God, outside of the church, started moving in the streets and saving us long-haired hippies, and we started going to church, and we were filling the churches, and believe me, there was a battle going on with the prime and proper church members as us long hairs came in, and they were sitting in the pews, we were sitting on the floors. They had shoes on, we didn't.
I right now am on my way to heaven for one reason and one reason alone, and that's because Jesus died on the cross and gave up his life for my sins, and I've received that substitutionary fact, and now I live for him.
If I die tonight, I'm going to leave this world. And I mean this with every ounce of me, and God knows it, and I tell him every day, I'm a blessed man, and I've had a good, easy life. Because 50 years ago, when I turned to Christ, or he called me, or however you want to term it, I made a commitment that I was going to do and be the best that I could be for him. I was not going to have any secret sins. It's been 50 years. I've never been called out for any kind of sexual sin. I've never been called out for any kind of stealing money. I haven't been called out. God has blessed my life. And believe me, 45 years, if you're doing something, you're going to get caught. But my God has kept me. And every day, I thank him for keeping me and blessing my life for 50 years. I want you to say that when your time comes. You start getting up there in age. I don't know how many years I have left. But I know when I see him, I do know this. I mean it with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength, and I'm not bragging it because he's done it all. I will not stand before him in secret sin. I'm not living two lives. What you see is what you get. That's one of the reasons my son's serving the Lord today. He saw dad in church. He saw dad at home. Same dad. You know how many kids I have come to me and say, my mom and dad raised their hands in church, but you should see them. They're out of control when they're home. Walk it. Live it. We're getting close. The end's coming. Jesus could come back at any time. When you stand before him in his righteousness, know that you've lived the best life that you possibly could for him.
I'll just say amen. We're going to ask everyone to leave out the doors directly up behind you. We were supposed to have a little area over there for you to greet the family. So if the Jakums want to leave, that would be good, because I know everybody wants to give you a hug. That's for sure. But we're going to go out those doors. Listen, please keep it limited. There's a lot of people. And then head over into the gym, and we have finger sandwiches, fruit, cookies, that sort of thing. I'll close us in prayer. Lord, we give you thanks for giving us such a friend, such a mentor, such a pastor. God, we did learn lessons. Let us apply them now in our lives. In Jesus' name, amen.